This video is brought to you by the Nightmare sequence. It has been a long time since we did this and took a deep dive into an excellent opening. Time for awakening and leave no stone unturned as we do so. Sword Art Online Alicization War of Underworld Part 2 is here, with Anima from Reona sets the theme along with the incredible opening sequence. Welcome to Alicization Explained, and it's me Gamerturk, your best source of Sword Art Online information, and this is the opening of Sword Art Online Alicization War of Underworld Part 2. First off, we start with a spoiler warning. This is an opening explained. Obviously, the opening has plenty of references, literal and metaphorical, to very specific future events. Unlike my episode explained videos, opening explained features big spoilers. If you don't want to be spoiled of what the events in the opening signifies, you should leave the video now, and I'll see you tomorrow in my episode explained video with no future spoilers. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of it. If you are curious about specific things in the opening, timestamps in the description can guide you to precise things. Don't worry, timestamp titles won't be spoilery, but explicit enough to guide you to correct scenes. Links to Sword Art Online light novels will be in the description as well if you want to read all the events for yourselves. I strongly recommend it, but aside from that, let's cast away the sly foxes spreading misinformation and get on with the first official Alicization explained of this core. And, well, let's jump into the nightmare, quite literally actually. The moment I heard the beginning of the song before we got the opening sequence itself, I just knew we would start with this. Kirito seemingly waking up in his classroom, trying to make sense of his surroundings. What you're seeing here is the beginning of the nightmare sequence, as we like to call it, which should arrive in about 2 or so episodes, possibly with this exact moment utilized as the cliffhanger of an episode. It is a sequence that starts with Kirito waking up in a classroom in real life and getting up to leave, only to start realizing something is wrong as his path that continues in volume 18 starts taking him through the biggest regrets of his life. The screen flashes twice before the scene changes in this opening. First flash is towards Kirito sitting at his desk looking at a floating island. You can potentially interpret this in one of the two ways, the first one being the floating island signifying Aincrad. That is the first thought in this nightmare sequence too, a memory about going back to the floating castle for the full release after the beta test, how Aincrad is all Kirito could think about wherever he was. However, looking at his surroundings, or well, rather lack thereof, this is Kirito around the southern tip of the Dark Territory, looking at the floating islet up at the sky, the way out, the world's end altar. We will see this once again later in this trailer, but this one cuts into a bunch of viola flowers, which, according to our lovely Taka from the SAO Wikia, signifies thoughtfulness or caring nature. And yeah, that is exactly the core reason of why Kirito is in the state that he's in, and even further, the exact reason why he's gonna do what he's gonna do to himself towards the end of the nightmare sequence and even beyond his awakening. What follows this is one of my favorite subtle symbolism stuff in this entire OP, and yet another reason to highlight that Alice and Kirito don't really have a close bond. We see Asuna casting her shadow onto Kirito, Suguha casting her shadow onto Kirito, Shino casting her shadow onto Kirito, as all three open their eyes slowly. This obviously ties in with Takeru Higa's plan to wake Kirito up, connecting the floodlights that share a close bond with Kirito with his floodlight in hopes of repairing his self-image as he absorbs the image he has in others' mind, as he remembers all the good he had done for them. You have seen parts of this in the trailer too. It's all part of the nightmare sequence still, and it doesn't quite work out the way Higa hoped to do at first. However, instead of the fourth piece of the puzzle, we see Alice casting a shadow not onto Kirito, as they don't share a close bond with each other in the first place. Unlike all the other three who had their backs turned to Kirito, signifying they were not in an expectation from him, Alice, with her eyes fully open from the beginning of the cut, looks straight into Kirito's eyes in hopes of answers or sign of life, as she had been doing since after the Battle of the Central Cathedral. And the nightmare sequence just keeps going. Well, more figuratively at this point, as it only includes few detailed instances in the novels. Well, this shot here gives us more of an overview of Kirito's past. One may consider this to be the quote-unquote bond each connected person shares with Kirito. First line being Aincrad with Asuna obviously, second one Lifa with Alo, third one Shino with Gangelon 9, and the final person opening up into the memories of Underworld, heading from the human realm through the Eastern Valley into the Dark Territory. And no, that fourth person is not Alice as mentioned. She simply does not have a close bond with Kirito to be utilized in this process, but the memory of the Blue Rose sword with the echo inside does. We see the Human Guardian army, and I love the attention to detail in this one. We got 8 people on the screen. From left to right, it's Fanatio, Berkuli, Sheta, Tize, Sortilina, Renly, Ronye, and Düsselbert. The shooting stars above signal the, let me say, incarnation of these people, as I don't want to specify it too much until the event itself arrives. There are only 7 of these streaks, however, so 1 missing streak. However, that is the purpose. In this entire crowd, all of them but one had meaningful experiences with Kirito, all but Sheta. Even Renly, when he was scared in the tent when the goblins attacked, he was shaken by the fact that even brain-dead Kirito was trying to reach out to protect Ronnie and Tize, and only then was he able to wield his twin-edged blades with confidence. However, Sheta has never even met Kirito, let alone have a meaningful experience with him, hence the one missing incarnation beam. And with all of them being sucked into the void, this scene is much more symbolic and a beautiful one at that. We see individual heroes both from Underworld and the real world in a real world setting. As I said, this is very much a symbolic one, and it is the core theme of Alicization in the first place, which will be highlighted even stronger in the epilogue of Alicization, either the final episode or the final 2 to 3 episodes, depending how they're gonna adapt. That core theme is the blurring line between virtual and real, as well as biological and artificial. The imagery, obviously, Shilika in the front, Berkuli and Fanatio in the back, Klein in the front, Düsselbert in the back, Egil in the front, Sheta in the back, Lisbeth in the front, Renly, Tize and Ronye in the back. And also, the overlay here should be very familiar to you. In fact, if you slow down the footage, it is quote-unquote a person taking out their Augma, and once you realize that, these visuals become a direct continuation of the previous scene. Here, we're still continuing to see all the people that Kirito has affected in his life in a positive way, all trying to lift Kirito up, support him in the direst of circumstances, yet he is still broken inside his soul. Part of him will most certainly never be fixed completely, hence the partial colors only on people he was part of their life of, and nothing visible on the world or the strangers around. And with him taking the Augma off, we see the end result of him standing up despite how broken he may be, despite how much he may have lost, the Floodlight acceleration rate shooting up uncontrollably. And Yui, in my opinion, she is just used as a reminder that she still does a lot to help the Human Guardian army in general, and as a transition slide. There's nothing much to say here. But as you can see, we're still in the recovery portion. More people that Kirito affected one way or another. If you realized, since multiple scenes ago I stopped calling this the nightmare sequence, we have been long past that, but even beyond after the sequence, Kirito is broken on a fundamental level, and these are still about reminding him of all the good he did to those around him, as that thoughtful and caring person that he always was and still is. Also, the screenshot format, I don't think this is an incomplete opening or anything, but that's what I thought back in Human Realm Mark II opening as well, so it wouldn't hurt mentioning here. On Kirito's eyes, we see a stairway to heaven, and yes, that is the World's End altar. I told you we would see it again, with stairs created via Asuna's Stacia abilities. We're gonna have very dramatic scenes happening on the stairs, especially the final one, but next we get a reflection of Alice holding the eye patch in her hand. This sequence makes me think we're basically rewinding time here from the final scene of the Underworld back to Alice with the eye patch in her hand, then blue roses, and finally Asuna back in real life, and you can see the promise ring from ordinal scale on her ring finger. Then we got the LightCube cluster crying blood. If you haven't realized, yes, this is also very much symbolic for all the war and slaughter going on, but the puddle on the ground is mixed with two others. One consuming black, symbolizing Gabriel Miller, and if you want you can throw Vassago in that basket as well, wouldn't be entirely wrong. And on the other side, a white one, purifying all of the pain and anguish. I say this is much more of a symbolic one, but goddamn, the more I talk about it, the more I feel it's getting literal. Anyways, I love the next bit. Kirito drowning further and further, and he's suddenly pulled even further down. You can even see his sinking getting faster right before scenes start flashing on the screen. But yeah, those are the ones trying to further sink him down, whether intentionally or unintentionally as a side product of trying to survive after all the stuff they have done, or simply as pawns manipulated by someone else to do their bidding to simply cause chaos. Those pawns are the Red Knights, obviously from the US, but also soon to be joined by Korea and China, which will lead to some brutal fight scenes and some brutal discussion scenes, let's say. Then we got Mr. Mole here with a gun in his right hand, Quinela's contact in the real world, the person Asuna had a weird feeling about in the first half, the one who worked for Nobuyuki Suguha, Yanai himself. What follows him is the ghost from the past, Vassago Casals aka Po, the former leader of Laughing Coffin. You will hear his story as well, and as a light novel reader, I just can't wait to see more of him in progressives as well. And last but not least, we got Gabriel Miller in his tactical Eugeo gear as Subtilizer, and on the other side, Eugeo with a LightCube in his hand. Now obviously, we're once again in the symbolic part of the spectrum, and my interpretation is that this is Eugeo holding his own LightCube, and a drop from that LightCube symbolizing his remaining echo inside Underworld despite the LightCube itself being deleted, dropping into the sea Kirito is drowning in and waking him up. And I love how they brought it all together with the colorless Kirito visuals since the beginning into his awakening. It's literally a husk around Kirito that gets torn and ripped apart as Kirito slowly wakes up, rather than Kirito himself transforming, which I find very fitting. After all, it was Kirito who forced the situation onto himself, and the solution, well, I'm gonna terribly simplify things here, but it was about accepting himself as who he truly is. Well, he's not fixed by any means. Accepting himself rips the lifeless husk apart, allowing him to reach his potential and having a relatively consistent self-image, which is pretty much the most important thing in Underworld due to the hardware, infrastructure and incarnation and stuff. And the strongest persona Kirito possesses is the Black Swordsman persona, hence why once the husk is ripped apart, it is the Black Swordsman that comes out of it. I also want to add, the cleanness of this transformation animation is beautifully crisp and clean. I absolutely cannot wait to get an uncompressed Blu-ray version of this. We see Lifa and Shino doing some stuff which doesn't signify anything. Well, Lifa is somewhat accurate, but Shino is just here for the lols. She doesn't have any scenes in the war anymore. She has more important tasks to attend to around the southern portions. But we see Stacia, or rather Asuna the Flash, against the man with the mate chopper. I'm really glad the opening kept this very brief instead of hinting some of the cool surprises in this fight. Much appreciated, so I don't need to provide you with the full context either. You can watch and enjoy it all on your own terms. It's gonna be great, and then we're gonna talk about in an episode explained instead. And we reach the final scene with that. Asuna and Alice looking towards Kirito. No, this is not where he wakes up prior to this, but this is where he has to give his best and hope that his broken self is somewhat up for the task. I love the sad smile he gives to them, trying to look confident but knowing the reality of the circumstances, let alone how he feels about everything. And yeah, this is full-on incarnation. Thought I'd mention that too, since he's in his Black Swordsman persona, despite being unreasonable in Underworld, which is designed to be realistic, he has both swords in his back, the same as SAO. And what follows? Not much explanation needed. A void that devours everything thrown his way, Subtilizer in his true form against Kirito the Black Swordsman. And of course, while it is a bit hard to count, I actually tried going frame by frame, which only made things more confusing by making the visuals more static, making actual swings harder to distinguish. But this is Starburst stream with a single twist that is not shown in the opening sequence. And of course, unlike all the previous openings, our title card is at the very end this time around. Alicization Awakening is the book we're adapting at the moment, and expect this to change into Alicization Lasting in 2 or 3 episodes roughly. The final scene I absolutely love, even more so because one thing here is something we couldn't really be certain of. First off, we see a huge gateway with Kirito, Alice and Asuna are on the edge of crossing. This is obviously symbolizing the gateway to the real world, symbolizing because the gate itself doesn't really exist, it's a symbolic gate. It's in reality it's just a console on the altar to log out. However, what follows is the cause of confusion here. Of course, this can become incredibly easy to understand if the anime shows us what this building is gonna be. We currently simply don't have enough visual references to make a guess on what the building is, but on the reflection of the nerve gear, we see this large building with 4 swords thrust into the ground. First off, I have to warn you additionally. I know we had a spoiler warning at the very beginning, but this is like spoilers of shortly after when the actual story itself ends, so if you don't want to hear, just skip this portion. I'll count down. 3, 2, 1. Okay. This may be where Kirito and Asuna, at this point of the story, Star King and Star Queen, may spend their remaining time peacefully or in an eternal slumber, even after the events of Moon Cradle, like their final resting place of some sorts. And by rest, I do actually mean rest. Do not get the wrong idea. But yeah, hoping to see what this building is visually in the anime so we can have a more reliable opinion. So take what I said here with a little bit of grain of salt. But in front, the swords, not even a speck of salt needed here. They are stuck there in a very specific order for a very specific reason. From left to right, that is Blue Rose Sword, Night Sky Sword, Radiant Light and the Osmanthus Blade. The reason why I'm saying it's a deliberate order, and thanks to Hisui on the SAO Wikia for bringing it to my attention, that is very much signifying the insignia of the Star King. And just as an example, I'm gonna be using an Axel Lord illustration here, please do not question the choice further, otherwise you're in for deep spoilers. The insignia features 2 swords in the middle, one black and one white, while around the rest of the insignia, blue roses and osmanthus flowers entwined around them. And with the battery of the nerve gear running out, the opening comes to a close. That was quite the long one for that opening. I just love the fact that this was a whole lot more symbolic this time around compared to some earlier openings, and especially towards the end of the OP. I love that they used the portion of the song that has these pauses in lyrics, like the lyric is kicking in 1 beat too late. I don't want to get this video claimed by Sony, so I hope you understand what I mean with this terrible description of what I mean. But that is all I got. If you made it this far, hit that like button and subscribe and hit the bell icon as well, and comment 200 years down below to let me know. You will understand that reference soon enough. Well, not soon, but sometime in the future. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter for the fastest news possible. Lens Squad merch is still around, but now we got Medina, Kirito and Eugeo merch available too, so do check it out. A huge thanks to all my patrons and channel members as always, and until next time, stay cool.